What if you wanted to play the Adepta Sororitas, but you didn't like Battle Sisters? Get out. No wait, this is the one video for you. Yes. Welcome, Fraternis Militia of the world. Here is how you can play the faction known for being predominantly female, but without any women. I will be going over the men of the Adepta Sororitas army, who they are, how to use them on the tabletop, then we will see if there are some working army lists we can make of the Adepta Sororitas faction, but with no Sisters of Battle. This video is not prompted by a Codex story showing that there is at least one woman among the 10,000 custodes, because I'm not touching that. You may be surprised that men are in the Sisters of Battle army, but ever since their inception as their own army in 2nd edition in the Codex called Sisters of Battle, there have been men as part of the faction. 2nd edition had some crazy times, like Eldar were using las guns, until Games Workshop said they were actually all shuriken catapults and the only Eldar with las weapons were tanks and swoopy whoopy hawks. Again, I want to stress that this is a video I've been working on for a while, and I am not going to give up on the playtesting I've done or the useful tabletop advice I can pass on because someone on Games Workshop's social media team made a comment on Twitter that got a lot of engagement. And the crazy times of 2nd edition had crazy people, like the Fraternis Militia. They were not officially warriors because the Adeptus Ministorum is not allowed men under arms. That is why the Sisters of Battle, as an all-female group, exploits that particular loophole. No, the Fraternis Militia were just concerned citizens who grouped together and were then guided by leaders of the Ecclesiarchy. That's the religious group, the Adeptus Ministorum. Perfectly reasonable people. The militia were religious fanatics or just very desperate. Thankfully, they fell into organized religion rather than disorganized, chaotic religion. They had their own models, but I like to use the Codor Gangers, which fit the style very well. There are no models or rules for Fraternis Militia currently, but we're going to see a workaround for that. These are only one of the units in the Adepta Sororitas army that are not exclusively women. There is potential in the Adepta Sororitas Codex, upcoming, to have a detachment focusing on the regular Ecclesiarchy troops. Even if they went in for a thematic Talons of the Emperor style, which is the basis of the Sacred Rose Order, which had its law in 8th and 9th edition emphasise the number of hangers-on and civilian militia supporters that the Order had. Or what may happen is the Ecclesiarchy becomes part of Imperial Agents. If there are going to be Grey Knights for Demon Hunters, Death Watch for Xenos Hunters, then there has to be Witch Hunters. And they are not getting the Sisters. We have worked too hard to have our own Codex back. After those times. I actually really like this codex, it was a good one. So the Ministorum units could get sent off to Imperial Agents. If that happens, then maybe instead of this video having a short time being relevant, I just get to rename it. So future people, if this specific thing happened, and this video isn't called Can You Play Adepta Sororitas Without the Sororitas, then that is why. Also, I have the gift of foresight and should be feared. Sometimes I scare myself, but not through looking in a mirror, obviously. It wouldn't be that unexpected if the Ecclesiarchy were moved into the Imperial Agents Codex. The Crusaders were previously viable in Imperial Guard armies, and the Imperial Guard still have their regimental preacher, much like the Preacher. I think the Tech Priest Engine Seer should also be an Imperial Agent. The Admech use them, the Imperial Guard use them, someone's fixing up the Sisters of Battle tanks, and Space Marines need someone to assist the Tech Marines. But this Adeptus Ministorum only Adepta Sororitas list potentially could be short-lived, or it could become part of the Imperial Agents and it will just be an Ecclesiarchy only detachment. The Witch Hunters. The older metal Preacher and Missionary were designed for the Sisters of Battle in 2nd edition, but the newer Daddy Thaddeus and pious Let It Burn Vaughn were brought in with the Blackstone Fortress game as basically replacement missionary and preacher models, but they were available to all Imperial armies. This was then followed up by a Crusader character that Games Workshop now encourages you to use as a regular Crusader as 10th edition came around. And if you're thinking, but the Sprues, it wouldn't work with the Sprues. Well, Pious Vaughn has been moved off onto her own sprue, as we have seen for the Darktide game, which isn't really worth buying even if you want the models, and it is overpriced for a miniature board game. Moving models onto their own sprue is something Games Workshop does for the Model of the Month. Parts for a multi-part kit are separated out, and it is made into the same model over and over again. So the models that were metal or finecast could become Imperial Agents if the rumoured unknown codex is indeed Imperial Agents. Otherwise, if they are not updating the models or giving them a new home, Crusaders and Assassins will probably go to Legends when the Codex comes out. The official models, not the proxy models, are metal or fine-cast resin. While the Metal Preacher model from 1997, their weapon options will probably go to Legends, but the plastic Pius Vaughan model may stay, even though the model isn't sold outside of the Blackstone Fortress game and the Darktide game. But that's a Games Workshop issue. Like, you can't buy Necromunda dice to play Necromunda, the ones you need to play Necromunda, outside of the starter set. So if you split a starter box, one of you can't play alone unless you're going to buy some third-party dice. So what units do we have in the Adepta Sororitas army? Arco-flagellants. They are the heavy hitters of the list, and they are tough as an old boot. I was going to say tough as an orc, but they may be tougher. Depends which orc detachment you're running. Currently, you can use them in squads of 3, because the current combat patrol set has a unit of 3, which means that they're sold in sets of 3 and sets of 10. In the upcoming Codex, when that combat patrol disappears, they may only be viable in units of 10, which is going to suck a bit. But as they're used in a unit of 3, they can hold objectives cheaply and prove difficult to shift. 6 wounds with a 4+ feel no pain is hard to get through. We have the Crusaders. Now, they got more expensive recently, but only if you're using a set of 2 in your army. That was the only points increase for them. Their job has been to sit on objectives. Because they're cheap, it means you're not relegating something that could be off killing the enemy to babysitting a circle. Now, a single dialogus or a missionary can do the same job of completing secondary actions and being cheap to sit on an objective, but if your opponent chooses Assassinate as a secondary objective, then you are in trouble. Before I got some Crusaders, I was using a single missionary. There is also an advantage in this list, because when the Crusaders are combined with the arco-flagellants, not as like you put one inside the other, they're not characters, they're not part of an enhanced bodyguard the way that like crypto thralls are, but if you have the Crusaders running alongside the arco-flagellants, most enemies are going to shoot the arco-flagellants. They are the bigger, scarier threat. If you can charge both at the same unit, we have the stratagem Suffering and Sacrifice. This works best on units that are a few elite models or one big monster. The enemy then has to target the Crusaders with their attacks, meaning that the arco-flagellants are going to be totally fine. And it also means that if you were charged instead, 2 command points for heroic intervention, and then another stratagem for Suffering and Sacrifice. It's a lot of command points to be using, but if it lets you wipe out an important enemy unit, and then you still have the arco-flagellants available to attack something else, it is worth it. The Death Cult Assassins are used in much the same way as the Crusaders. The models are female because they're based on 2 characters from the bigger scale Inquisitor game. You can have male Death Cult Assassins in the lore. In the 40k role-playing game Dark Heresy, becoming a Death Cult Assassin is something your character can do, regardless of gender. The male Preacher model is this older guy with a chainsword, but having an auto pistol and chainsword isn't doing you a lot of favors compared to the Zealot's Vindicator, which is a heavy flamer, though without the armor penetration, and also it's a massive chainsword with damage too. They can join arco-flagellants, Crusader squads, and Sister Novitiate squads. Most likely you're going to want to put them in arco-flagellant squads because the ability to have +1 to wound is great when your strength 5 means you may already be wounding on a 3+, and against larger things like tanks, you go from wounding on a 5+ or 6+ to 1 better, 5+ or 4+. The issue then is armor penetration, so it doesn't work so well against vehicles that have a 2+ save. Just remember that their second ability, the Zealot, which is once per game, it affects only that Preacher model, where you get +2 strength and +2 attacks. That's what you want the Zealot's Vindicator for, but it doesn't affect the surrounding arco-flagellants. The missionaries can join arco-flagellants, Crusaders, Novitiate squads, and also Sisters of Battle. However, since their ability War Hymn grants sustained hits 1, you don't really want it on the arco-flagellants because they already have sustained hits. And because it is sustained hits in combat only, there's not a lot of benefit for the Sisters of Battle squad, or their sustained hits will work on Crusaders. As a very cheap unit, he can be used to complete secondary objectives. Again, just beware, if you have a lot of characters, your opponent may just take Assassinate as a secondary objective in the Leviathan mission deck. And then we have the heavy hitter of this list, the Penitent Engine. Now importantly, not mortifiers, because mortifiers in the lore are repentia who have run away after being in the repentia, so they are Adepta Sororitas. And you can especially tell because they have the 6+ invulnerable save, which is common to all of the sisters in the Battle Sister army. For what they do, Penitent Engines are cheap. They're a big distraction ball of murder, and being able to advance and charge when you already move 8 inches, Gene Stealers are on par with that kind of speed, but they don't have the massive buzz blades and flamers. Your only ranged weapons are the Penitent Flamers, but when you're getting 2d6 shots, and it's twin linked so you're rerolling all those wounds, that can be a lot of damage just from them. It's definitely valuable for Overwatch. And while the toughness 6 and 5 wounds with a 4+ save puts them at a similar kind of toughness as a Terminator in terms of the amount of endurance of damage you can take, but what sets them apart from Terminators, that means they're more likely to survive heavy shots like las cannons, is a Feel No Pain 5+, something that the Tyranids desperately like to use a stratagem for to make sure they have on their larger monsters. Reducing all damage by a third means that they're going to last a lot longer than you'd think. For their weapons, you can have a single Penitent Buzzblade and a single Penitent Flail. You don't get to attack with both of those weapons because in the combat phase you pick one melee weapon. So having one of each gives you choice, but not specialization. Twin Penitent Flails that are twin linked, on strength 5 you get to reroll wounds, that's very valuable, so the twin Penitent Flails are a good idea. I just can't get past the Buzzblades, which have sustained hits 1, and at twin linked you don't accidentally roll a 1 or a 2 and suddenly not be cutting through the enemy vehicle. You can scythe through things pretty well. Just 4 attacks means that you're unlikely to kill a vehicle in one go. To have more of a chance of destroying the enemy vehicle, you use Tank Shock. And that's why you want the Buzzblades, at least one of them. Because with Tank Shock, you roll a number of dice equal to the strength of the weapon. You want to roll 10 dice, and if your strength is higher than the enemy toughness, then you get an additional 2 dice. So that's 12 dice, and every 5+ is a mortal wound, averaging 4 mortal wounds. While a high number of attacks is nice on the Penitent Flails, we have anti-infantry weapons elsewhere, including the flails of the arco-flagellants. Buzzblades are the way to go, generally. And to make life easier, the 2 saws is how the monopose model comes, and that's what I know most of you have. But they do make a mess of a lot of things. It's important to note that we still use the army special rule. That is for all Adepta Sororitas units, so you get miracle dice. And if you want to know way more than ever about miracle dice to make sure you are playing miracle dice correctly, there is a video for that. So here's a starting 1000 point army. It uses the Hallowed Martyrs detachment, an apt name because a lot of models will die. Despite the invulnerable saves or the Feel No Pains, we have quite a squishy force. Would it be really cool to fight with this against the new Chaos Cult detachment in the Chaos Space Marine Codex? We have a missionary as our warlord that I'm calling Kirinov, based on this model. He's not a special character with rules that we have, so to represent the mace with the current index rules, he has the Blade of St. Eleanor. It's useful to have the blade on a missionary because of the Holy Piety rule, which means that when he makes an attack, if that model is not battle shocked, he can re-roll the hit roll. Right away we're going to damage 2, which is enough to be killing Chaos Space Marines, and if he's taken any wounds, he can be taking out the bigger Chaos monsters like the Possessed, Chaos Terminators, and the Torments of the Accursed Cultist unit. He's with a squad of 4 Crusaders. This combo will get sustained hits on the power weapons, which is underused, because it is not as good when you think of it compared to the Preachers, with the arco-flagellants getting +1 to wound. Having a slightly larger squad of Crusaders also skips the tax for the recent points increase of having just 2 models. And though it's a minor thing, while the Crusaders are with a Preacher or Missionary, they have a 4+ Feel No Pain against mortal wounds. This grouping is also usually skipped over because Celestian Sacrosancts are about the same cost, and they pair better with regular Sisters characters. But you take Sacrosancts if you like the models, and you aren't doing a No Girls Allowed. We have another Missionary based on Thaddeus, who has a Holy Pistol and a power weapon, again with 4 Crusaders. These can be a unit that follows behind arco-flagellants and they hold the objective. With the invulnerable saves, even though it's only 4+, they can be annoying to shift. Our third missionary, again with 4 Crusaders, is called Jacobus, based on this model. Again, special character that doesn't currently have rules, not even in Legends. They have the Ministorum shotgun, holy pistol, and chainsword. With the shotgun, you can advance and still complete secondary actions like cleanse because it is an assault weapon. Very useful. And because he's getting up close to the enemy, the enhancement Saintly Example, so that when he dies, he generates a lot more miracle dice that can be funneled into the Penitent Engine, especially on the hit rolls, especially if you have a 6, because then you get the sustained hits. The core of the army, the bits that will be doing the actual killing of the enemy, holding them up, making sure that they can't score victory points, is very blunt. It is 3 lots of preachers with 3 lots of 10 arco-flagellants. We have a preacher called Amadeus Hellfire. That was a character that existed in the 2nd edition Sisters of Battle Codex. If you want to know more about them and others, then I have a video about the Lost Sisters of Battle models, which is very interesting if you want to look back at the things that could have been. Devotee Malicent is an Inquisitor game character who loved fire and carried a massive chainsword. And we have the aptly named actual model for Pious Vaughn. Because of their background, all of these models wield the Vindictor. It is also the better weapon option. The preachers deliver a lot of punch themselves, as well as supporting the arco-flagellants with +1 to wound. The arco-flagellants are strong. At the size of game this is, 1000 points, they should be able to batter their way through most enemies and endure the attacks of a lot of things, because even though we have 2 wounds, damage 2 weapons are unlikely to kill a model because of a 4+ feel no pain. Meaning you'll have to hit them with an average damage 3 weapon, or those damage 2 weapons, such as a Genestealer Cult Demolition Charge, those wounds are going to get wasted, and it will take far more shots than you'd think just to get rid of them. As the preachers are an integral part to getting +1 to wound, if ever they are shot by precision weapons, use Divine Intervention to bring them back. You have to discard some miracle dice, but as they go down, they generate a miracle dice, because they are technically destroyed, and a destroyed model is set back up, meaning that when they go down again, if they go down again, you generate another miracle dice for them, so you do get these miracle dice back, especially if you're using a character with Saintly Example. Again, there are more tips like this in my recent video on miracle dice. If the preacher is taken out by precision a second time, or you don't have the command points at the moment, Holy Rage will do the same thing. It gives you +1 to wound. I would save it for arco-flagellants instead of trying it on crusaders. If the enemy did have an absolute Death Star that was able to destroy one of your units of arco-flagellants in one go in combat, rather than looking to suffering and sacrifice to try and redirect some of the attacks, Spirit of the Martyr will let your models still fight after death. And unlike with other armies, like the Chaos Space Marines in the Word Bearers detachment, it's not conditional to you rolling a dice. It is every model that is destroyed, they still get to fight. This will either let you mutually destroy the enemy Death Star or massively reduce its power. But what if we just get shot instead? Well, this is partly why we have a Penitent Engine. It's a big distraction thing, and it can technically be killed by small arms fire. It's important to remind your opponent that it can go down to that. Toughness 6 means that bolt guns are wounding it on a 5+. Most attacks out there are strength 4. So the Penitent Engine will get shot instead of the arco-flagellants. I would still try and hide from dangerous heavy weapons, but being able to advance and still charge will let you get much closer to those heavy weapons before they have a chance to do more than one shot. If some of your arco-flagellants or crusaders get shot and there's a Penitent Engine nearby, Rejoice the Fallen is a very nice stratagem because those heavy flamers are auto-hitting and re-rolling wound rolls because of twin linked. In this list I would have the twin Penitent Buzzblades on the Penitent Engine because we're going to need some armor penetration. We have a little bit with the power swords of the Crusaders, but that's not a great deal. The arco-flagellants have no armor penetration. Their way of taking down heavier units like Terminators is to make the enemy take so many saves that they fail some of them eventually. And our last unit is the Death Cult Assassins. I've gone for a unit of 4 because then we skip the tax of having just 2 of them, and when there's 4 of them, Overwatch is less likely to be able to wipe out the whole unit. Their job is to actually do the assassination. We've seen in this list how very powerful characters are for making the army work. So when we have fights first and precision attacks, and they're getting a decent armor penetration, 4 of them can be enough to take out some of the important enemy characters. Remember, for precision attacks, you don't need to be in base contact with a character, you just need to have line of sight to them while being in contact with the enemy unit that they are attached to. So there's the list as a whole. It's very much theme over rules. It'll work. I have made it work relatively well, but if the enemy is equipped to deal with horde tactics, and as the green tide is becoming more popular, this style of fighting also suffers as a result. Let's look at another list at a higher points value, 1500 points. This is a suffer not the witch to live list. The core is exactly the same. 3 squads of 10 arco-flagellants with preachers. It is such a good combo. But this time, the Blade of St. Eleanor has been moved from one of the missionaries onto a preacher. They're more likely to be getting into combat, they're going to be doing more damage. At this time, I wasn't keen on being tied to the look of the model. With the Blade of St. Eleanor giving you bonus strength and attacks and damage, this pairs very well the Preacher's Zealot ability to give them more strength and attacks. 6 attacks at strength 8 with 2 damage is what you're going to be needing to get through the enemy's elite. Once per game only, but if you can line up that attack correctly, it'll do the job. And we have a lot of arco-flagellants with their 2 wounds and feel no pains to make sure the Preacher survives to deliver that attack. And when the arco-flagellants do charge, I would activate the extremist trigger word. Remember that for 10th edition, we're no longer rolling dice and for every 1 you take a mortal wound. It is just that after the attacks have been all done, you roll a dice for each model that used hazardous weapons. For every 1, that model is destroyed. Sadly, feel no pains do not come into it. Getting 2 more attacks, and having sustained hits, and having twin linked so that your wounds will actually wound. When you get into combat, you have to make sure your combat does damage. It is also optional to just tie up the enemy, and arco-flagellants can do that with their toughness, but the ability to kill the enemy rather than just annoy the enemy is much more valuable. There are 2 sets of 2 crusaders. These are in strategic reserves. They can arrive and then complete secondary objectives, like having models in every table quarter. And then in your turn, if you don't draw any secondary objectives that require you to be completing actions, or they're in the wrong place, then you can charge them closer to the enemy, alongside some arco-flagellants, and then we use suffering and sacrifice, so that the crusaders go down, not the more valuable, powerful arco-flagellants. To protect the home objective, there are 6 crusaders, with another missionary. The missionary has litanies of faith. This allows you to re-roll some of your miracle dice once per turn, or if the model's injured, more than 1. It's a very valuable enhancement in this list because we don't have access, at least under the restrictions we've imposed on ourselves, we don't have access to Imagifiers, who can make the miracle dice we gain from death much better. This is recycling the miracle dice into better miracle dice, because we also don't have a Dialogus to turn the miracle dice into a 6, and we don't have a Palatine who can be doing rapturous blows with any kind of miracle dice. So being able to make the miracle dice we have better, it's very valuable. We're still going to have a Jacobus style missionary with his shotgun, because then we can advance and complete secondary actions. Still going to have Saintly Example so that when he dies we get more miracle dice, but he's going to go with a bunch of novitiates. Now you're thinking, well, hang on, those are Sisters of Battle. I said no female units. We can have 1, and these are used to represent Fraternis Militia. Fraternis Militia as a band, yeah, they could have like primitive shields and pistols and things, but they had at the core of it a close combat weapon and a pistol, with options to take flamers. The Sisters Novitiate squad is predominantly based around the combat variant with pistols and swords. You can also give them auto guns. That is a Fraternis Militia weapon, because they're not full bolt guns. These rules very much suit the vibe of a Fraternis Militia band following along behind a missionary. While I would prefer to have lethal hits from a Palatine, sustained hits will give them more attacks, with more chances to damage the enemy. It's just a bit annoying that the missionary's own ability to reroll hit rolls is also overlapped with the novitiate's ability to reroll hit rolls of 1, or if attacking an enemy on an objective, reroll all hit rolls. That is why we moved the Blade of St. Eleanor off the missionary and onto one of the preachers. So using the stats and rules, not the models, we have Fraternis Militia. And with their own ability to advance and still charge, and the way we can generate miracle dice when they kill something, if they kill something, there is another way that this army can generate miracle dice. They will support the arco-flagellants, but not be the front line unit like the arco-flagellants are. The Fraternis Militia could be on the front line, but all we would likely get from them is the miracle dice when they perish. It would depend how heartless you're feeling. Should the civilians die, or should the lobotomized civilians die first? Such is the morality of the 41st millennium. We also have 4 Penitent Engines in squads of 1. If you're about to say, whoa, 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 I've read the 10th edition rules, you're only allowed to use the same datasheet 3 times. We'll come to that. In the Hallowed Martyrs detachment, there isn't really a benefit to having 2 Penitent Engines in the same squad. Because of the detachment special rule giving bonuses to units below starting strength and below half strength, if you are a single model and you go below half wounds, in this case taking 3 wounds, then you get +1 to wound. However, if you are a unit of 2, one of them gets destroyed, that makes the unit below starting strength, but they can never get below half strength. They will always be at half strength. It's just an annoying way that the rules for being below starting strength and below half strength work. While we do have buzz blades, and 2 of the Penitent Engines would have those buzz blades, the other one would have the flails, because that's a lot of attacks to help you get through screening infantry. Penitent Engines will be going up the front. They will be charging the enemy screens. We want to sweep them away so that the arco-flagellants can get to the units behind that are more valuable. So these are best when running by themselves. So we have 3 individual Penitent Engines and a bigger Penitent Engine. This is an Armiger Warglaive. We are lacking anti-tank. I see no reason why we couldn't equip such a Penitent Engine with a melter weapon. You know, one of the Holy Trinity, the melter, the flamer, the bolt gun. Thermal spears will help. And there's a little melter gun on top to also give a little bit of, well, anti-heavy infantry firepower. The Reaper Chain Cleaver is a better version of the Penitent Buzzblade. Higher armor penetration, higher damage, though we lose the sustained hits and twin-linked abilities. And with a toughness of 10 and 12 wounds, it is harder to take down one of these than it is to take down a Penitent Engine. But if the enemy focuses on the Armiger Warglaive, the Penitent Engines are still able to run amok. They're distractions, but they can also do damage once they get there. In this list I've removed the Death Cult Assassins, but we need some precision, so I've added in a Vindicare Assassin as one of 2 units that's going to give us anti-character firepower. I recommend using their special ammunition as soon as there's an enemy character in sight that you want dead, use it as soon as possible, and hope you get the damage through. This is fine for a Sacred Rose style assisting army, but not advisable in an Argent Shroud style army for reasons. The final way we have precision is with an Inquisitor, Inquisitor Eisenhorn. Now, I'm not necessarily sure the Ecclesiarchy would get on with him and his demon host, but when you put the demon host next to the arco-flagellants, they look very similar, so I'm sure he'd be able to pass one off as the other, as long as you use this model, not this one. Eisenhorn's Mind Assault is a character killer. It's only 2 shots, but with sustained hits 1, a high enough strength so that you're wounding most characters on a 3+, -2 AP, and 3 damage. So 2 of those getting through should kill a character. Sadly, he can't use miracle dice to guarantee that, but that's where we can have the Exodus rifle in support. His bolt pistol is not listed as a pistol, so you can fire his pistol and do Mind Assault at the same time. In combat, his rune staff will hit things really hard. And while he has the same ability as the Genestealer Cult Magos, it's not a great ability, but it can inconvenience bigger enemies like an enemy knight. The Malleus Codicium allows the demon host in the Acolyte unit that we're obviously putting him with to double their attacks, and that is shooting attacks and close combat attacks. So that's 2 of the pretty horrifying Unholy Gaze and 8 attacks with the Warp Grasp, which makes it a bit better than the arco-flagellants who have sustained hits and twin-linked. The demon host gives the whole unit a 5+ invulnerable save. The Jacaro means that their shooting attacks are getting +1 to wound. That includes the Unholy Gaze, and it includes the psychic attacks of Eisenhorn, while as Acolytes, enemy units are at -1 to wound against the squad. I wouldn't say they're truly frontline brawlers, but if they're a bit further behind the arco-flagellants as a second wave, they can do some damage. And the Mystic will keep you safe from enemy deep strike, as they have an aura that prevents deep strike within 12 inches. One of the main drawbacks with having the Inquisitorial Acolytes is it is hard to get the models. Most likely you're going to have to convert them. This unit is very good for damage output, but look at this, we're remaking Codex Witch Hunters. We don't want to include an Inquisitor without their acolytes because, at least in this army, we're not taking any battle line units, so there's no other unit for the Inquisitors to join. This list is 2,000 points, very heavy on the Adeptus Ministorum, but in a Sisters of Battle army. It is Sacred Rose and Friends. It's good to take advantage of the points drop to the Penitent Engine, so we have 3 of them. But I don't think an Armiger is a large enough Penitent Engine. Some people are massive heretics. They need a massive Penitent Engine. So something with an even bigger flamer, bigger than the heavy flamer. It's actually a melter. And we need a super massive buzzblade. So this Knight Errant is a good choice. For pure fire, there is also the Knight Valiant, but it doesn't have the big choppy sword, so it's not the same. Most of these units can be bought at a discount from my affiliate links in the description. It is country dependent, but there are savings of between 10% and 21% off compared to buying through Games Workshop. And if you're in the UK, a couple of hours before this goes live, Firestorm Games still has 1 Sisters of Battle Combat Patrol remaining. That Combat Patrol is no longer sold by Games Workshop as it's going to be replaced by a presumably less valuable version alongside the new Sisters of Battle Codex. And I have an upcoming video on that, so subscribe to keep up to date. There is a Palatine leading the Novitiates, the Fraternis Militia, so that they can get lethal hits, and the Palatine and her Blade of St. Eleanor gets to reroll hit rolls of 1. Very useful when hitting on a 2+. The entire army is led by Morwen Val. As the head of the Ecclesiarchy on the High Lords of Terra Council, it seems sensible that the preachers and missionaries and the rest of the Ministorum would be following her into battle. So naturally she has non-penitent walkers, the Paragon Warsuits. I always like the grenades, and while you could do a holy trinity of Melter, Flamer and Bolter, 3 multi-melters is probably best because Morwen Val gives them reroll hits and wounds. For melee weapons, a mix is good. Have at least 1 mace so that there's another unit that can be doing tank shock, and that is at strength 12. But if they're with Morwen Val, even though the mace gets 1 fewer attack and hits on a 4+ rather than a 3+, the higher damage is very effective, and the reroll to hit rolls can offset some of that 4+ to hit. And if you're thinking, whoa, Junith is there? Why do you have Junith Arutia in a Sacred Rose army when she is obviously from our Martyred Lady? Well, that's not Junith. That is a preacher on top of Junith's pulpit. Not a Sacred Rose character, so it tracks. And they support the Battle Sisters at the back. I'm not going to explain how all of these Sisters units work. I'll just leave this video here that explains how to use them and the Ecclesiarchy units in more detail. Have a great day of 40k.